キャシー僕によるプレゼンテーション、ビットコインの機関投資家による認識の向上、機関投資家の初期導入と抵抗、技術の融合、イノベーションと破壊的イノベーション、ビットコインのベンチマーク資産化、マクロ経済地政学的要因、そしてビットコインの戦略的準備金資産としての可能性を、このキャシー僕の、これスピーチで、紹介していきたいと。まとめると、ビットコインの機関投資家による、認識の向上、3年間のムービングアベレージは毎年上昇していて、機関投資家が無視できない存在に、つまり ETF とかに組み込まないとまずいよねということで、しかも他の資産との相関性も依然として低いから、リスクヘッジとしてもビットコインがね、投資するということで、ポートフォリオマネージャーは自宅、これはコストリアンではなくても、フィデューシアリのね、リスポンシビリティを果たすために、つまりクライアントに一番の利益をもたらすというのが目的であるため、ビットコインを検討する必要が出てくると。で、機関投資家の初期導入の抵抗ということで、機関投資家からはね、もともと強い抵抗があったと。バンクオブアメリカとかね、そちら系っていうのはビットコイン関連とクリプト関連というのはやっちゃダメみたいな。ドバイでも、クリプト関連からの入金が銀行にあるのを銀行嫌ってたと。しかし、今日ね、アブダビがね、ドバイのとか、アブダビ、まあ違う都市だけども、リアルエステートの購入をね、クリプトビットコインできるようにするとかってことで、銀行もそれね、OK になると。で、ニューヨーク証券取引所の承認を得る必要があり、当初はポートフォリオのね、1% 以内にビットコインを抑えろってキャッシー僕のアークインベストの ETF はね、言われたらしいんだよね。でも今はどんどん統合がね、続いていると。これからどんどん来ると。もうダム決壊、崩壊みたいな感じでね。で、イノベーション的なところで言うと AI、ロボティクス、エネルギーの貯蓄、これはテスラのね、エネルギーバッテリーと一緒、ブロックチェーン、これらが全てがね、今収束してコンバージしているということで、AI が技術の融合を加速してデフレ圧力、つまり値段が安くなる、iPhone がね、毎年安くなるデフレ圧力、そして分散型自立組織のね、DAO、これもビジネスモデルが変化しつつあって、ビットコインのベンチマーク資産家としては、伝統的な金融市場のベンチマークになると。つまり、今まではね、ゴールドと比べてとか SP500 に比べてとなったんだけども、今度はビットコインがね、主要なベンチマークになってくるということで、ウォーレン・バフェットもね、もしかしたらね、ビットコイン買うかもしれないみたいなニュースがね、噂出てるんだけども、他の資産をね、依然上回ってるのでね、ゴールドも SP500 も GAFAM もね、すべて上回ってるのがこのビットコイン。で、マクロ経済的にも貿易戦争、財政、政策といった世界経済の動向と密接に関連していて、関税とか諸々で弱くなったりする中で、例えばエルサルバドールとかアルゼンチンとかも、通貨が弱くなってもビットコインが上がる資産ということで唯一無二。税制が変更されて、クリプトのね、タックスがね、0% になると言われているアメリカ、さらにビットコインに入ってくるんじゃないか。不確実性の高い市場環境の中で、機関投資家がね、ヘッジ資産としてビットコインを検討し始めると。つまり国をね、またぐ世界共通のアセットという認識がもうすでに始まっていると。そして戦略的準備金としてアメリカがね、今日、特大ニュースでSBR、戦略的ビットコイン準備金の法案申請をするっていうのを発表されて、20年間で、向こう10年間で1億ビットコイン、つまり100万ビット、100万ビットコイン分を買うって言ってるんだよね。10年間で。で、それを20年間保持するっていうような内容の法案を、提出するようにすると、シンシア・ルミス、上院議員が言ったように、これだけではなくて、州もね、テキサスとかも今やってるんだけども、法案が続々と来てるということで、これからビットコインがかなり扱われることで、男磨き、で、ハイティーパフォーマーをすごい目指すお前には、これを見て、ね、先見性のね、耳をかっぽじって、キャシー僕とゴリの背中ついてこいっていう感じで、キャシー僕の、かなり身に染みるスピーチをいってらっしゃい。
I think it is beginning to turn heads. If you look at the 3-year moving average, Bitcoin has gone up every year. And I think it's just becoming undeniable that it is a force that especially now, that institutions have to consider it. We showed the correlations of returns. The correlations with other assets, still very low. It's absolutely essential that institutional asset allocators take a look at this asset. Hello, everyone.
2014, I think it was.
Yes.
You put Bitcoin into your portfolio.
Well, 2014 was our first blog. 2015 was our first white paper. And we put... we gave our clients exposure to Bitcoin, GBTC at the time, the only thing we could use, in 2015, between $200 and $250.
All right.
Oh, by the way, we faced so much resistance.
That's what I was going to ask you about. Explain what the reaction was.
No, from everyone, including, we had to ask permission. We had to ask the New York Stock Exchange permission to put it in. I don't know all the rules and regs, but they said, okay, yes, but only 1% of the portfolio. But they didn't tell us that we had to sell it if it went higher. So we just never sold it until the end of 2017, where other regulations and the pushback from traditional financial service really hit. We were scaling our business, meaning our ETF business, which is all around all kinds of disruptive innovation. And so, boom, but we were not getting on platforms like Merrill, Morgan Stanley, and others because our flagship had Bitcoin in it. And so we then decided, okay, we're going to keep it in next generation internet, but flagship right at the top, $20,000. Better lucky than smart.
You every year put out a big ideas list, and it's all the things that you guys think are going to be important for the next year, but also you highlight a lot of innovative technologies. And I think why you are so loved is because you're constantly thinking about where the world is going and which technologies are going to play a big part there. Bitcoin has been one of those technologies for a long time, but it is not operating in a vacuum. We now are seeing things like artificial intelligence and humanoid robots, even self-driving cars. And it feels like when I read the big ideas and listen to you talk, these things are all coming together. And so talk a little bit as to how you see Bitcoin's role in maybe the broader innovative technology bucket and how these things will all kind of work in unison as we kind of build the future.
Yes. One other pushback we got, just to say, when we first put it in, we were kind of new to the business, and the most famous ETF publication of the time made fun of us, saying, yeah, great marketing gimmick. And my answer to that was, great. They have no idea what this is. They have no idea. Anyway, yes. So we just put out earlier this month something called Big Ideas 2025. And we've become fascinated with the convergences among all of the technologies around which we have centered our research. So we've centered our research around the 5 major innovation platforms evolving today. So, as you said, Anthony, robotics, energy storage, artificial intelligence, blockchain technology, and multi-omic sequencing in the life science space. AI, if you look at the convergence chart in that deck, and compare it to the one we put in last year, what you see are the convergences are intensifying with AI, really the heartbeat of convergence, pushing everything along and accelerating the pace of change, and also accelerating the deflationary undercurrents. And I know this is very controversial, but accelerating the deflationary undercurrents that we believe are going to intensify. Deflation, not bad deflation, good deflation. When you cut prices, you enable more access, right? So if you look at the convergence chart, we've focused, of course, on blockchain technologies and agentic AI. And I'm sure people have talked about this today, no?
No.
Oh, okay.
Teach us, Kathy.
All right. Have you heard of agentic AI? Yes?
Yes.
So I wish when I started ARC, I wish I had an agent who I could just say, I want to start this company. Tell me what I need to do legally, operationally, marketing-wise. And you can do that today. And of course, DAOs, back in 2016, we heard distributed autonomous organizations. People were saying, that's crazy. And we were saying, no, something's going to happen that's going to enable this new world. And so the world we're moving into, let's say I start up my business and, you know, my agent that I put on each of these tasks, you know, has to facilitate payment, you know, from one to the other. And however we structure the organization, it can't be done with fiat now, the way we're set up. It probably only can be done with blockchain technology and crypto assets of various types. And I know we have a lot of Bitcoin maxis here, and we're as maxi as they come in terms of where we think the ultimate value will reside in the entire ecosystem. But in terms of facilitating both personal agents, I hate shopping. I just want someone to dress me and, you know, tell me what I look good in, or somebody else tell me what I look, and just have it happen. We're moving into that kind of world. And as we enable our agents to do more and more, giving them more information and freedom to do so, we're going to need peer-to-peer transactions, API to API payments in order to follow through on some of these autonomous organizations.
When I hear you talk, what I think about is Bitcoin is becoming this hurdle rate. It's becoming this kind of benchmark where you're talking is the ultimate, you know, place where value will reside. How do you think about Bitcoin from a portfolio standpoint? If it continues to compound at 60% year after year after year after year, is every Wall Street investor just eventually have to throw their hands up and say, I can't beat this thing. I got to buy it. Like how does that play into an investment community that, you know, billions of dollars is spent on salaries and offices and research and all this stuff, and Bitcoin just continues to outperform them?
So again, in Big Ideas 2025, I guess I'm promoting that quite a bit, but there is a page where we're talking to traditional financial services. And I don't know if you're referencing this, but we list the assets and their compound annual rate of return over the last 5 years, all of them, all of the major assets. And we put in there the Sharpe and Sortino ratio. So if you don't do quantitative analysis, modern portfolio theory, all of that, you're probably not going to care about that, but they do. And I think it is beginning to turn heads because, you know, if you look at I think it's not even the 4-year moving average, which would capture the cycle, but the 3-year moving average. Bitcoin has gone up every year if you're using a 3-year moving average. And I think it's just becoming undeniable that it is a force that especially now that institutions have to consider it as a new asset class, because we've also put out there, I actually put it out in 2016, Bitcoin ringing the bell for a new asset class. We showed the correlations of returns. The correlations still, even though traditional investors are getting involved, the correlations with other assets still very low. It's absolutely essential that institutional asset allocators take a look at this asset. If they don't, they're not doing their fiduciary responsibility. So we're trying to help ease them, provide a bridge. Okay, we're talking your language. Bitcoin is not only a technology. It's not only one of the biggest ideas ever, the global monetary system, rules-based, digital, private, all of that. But it is a new asset class. And when you present investors with those three and they're not knowledgeable enough, it's a little bit threatening, or they feel a bit vulnerable. So we are trying to bridge in with, okay, we're going to talk your language. You need to look at this new asset class.
It's not operating in a vacuum. There is a global macro world. There is trade wars. We saw today Zelensky
did you see?
and Trump. I don't know if anyone has seen yet, but President Trump and Vice President Vance essentially, called Zelensky into the principal's office and in front of the media, told him, knock it off.
Took him to the woodshed. That's a good Reagan expression.
Took
him to the woodshed in front of all the world to see.
And so as that's happening, let's just say that there's maybe two major themes. There is the global macro world, which is global liquidity and interest rate and policy decisions and all that, overlaid with uncertainty, maybe is the best way to do it, right? And I think that there's a lot of people blaming the recent price action on Bitcoin and all that on some of that uncertainty. But how do you see Bitcoin's future if we have a world where Doge is cutting government spending, if we have a world where these trade wars are playing out? Like how does your...
There are 5 major innovation platforms involving 15 technologies are converging and disrupting the entire traditional world order. Well, what in that world? Now, I'm very confident in our research and in our projections, but if I'm someone who doesn't do what I do all day long, and I'm studying all the ways to hedge against, all the uncertainties out there, ground shifting underneath us technologically, geopolitically, what is the one thing I am certain about? I am certain about 21 million units. I am certain about that. And there have been, for those of you, I don't know if we have an economics-oriented audience here, but Art Laffer actually helped us write that first white paper on Bitcoin. And he said, after he agreed to collaborate with us, and he said, this is what I have been waiting for since the U.S. closed the gold window in 1971. He's been waiting. He's 85 now, I think. This has rejuvenated him. And he's proselytizing to the rest of the world, El Salvador, Suriname, he was in Argentina. And he's beginning to help them understand how important this source of certainty will be to them. And, one of the biggest things that has surprised us, when we were brainstorming about Bitcoin in the early days of ARK, our working assumption was that the early government adopters of Bitcoin would be in the emerging markets because they live in such a chaotic world that is, they are battered every now and then by the dollar's appreciation, and which, they've got a lot of dollar denominated debt. They run their countries on their own currency, and they're losing out constantly. So I've been very surprised that the U.S. really, yes, El Salvador was there, but the U.S. is leading the charge here, and I think it's going to serve us very well over time.
I want to talk about the economy moving forward over the next year, 2 years, 3 years, because I think that's going to have a very big impact on Bitcoin. Mm-hmm. Let's start with Doge. Mm-hmm. They say they're slashing costs. Every day they're tweeting some ridiculous use of taxpayer money. What is your confidence level in their ability to be successful? But also, how do you think that affects financial markets? So much of asset prices going up has been that the government is incredibly bad at their job and they waste a lot of money. So we devalue the dollar and asset prices go up. But if Doge is successful, does that actually hurt asset prices?
Oh, no. I actually think this is, I started in the business, I was in college in the late 70s, but really here in New York in the early 80s. And it was the Reagan Revolution. And he was changing. The 70s were just a horrible decade. And so there was a similar kind of an election and a willingness to change. I think we're well known for our Tesla research and our Tesla position. So I don't speak to Elon that much, but when we talked about this topic, I said, government spending is taxation. Government spending, that's how you sell this. surface everything that you find out there because, you know, we haven't done that. We haven't cleaned house in so long. And I think, you know, Elon is relentless, and he's got a boss who's also relentless. So I do think it's going to be successful. I think it's going to drive huge increases in productivity as well. So Reagan Revolution, I think this revolution will dwarf the Reagan Revolution, but I grew up in the heyday of active asset management. Now everybody kind of is passive or benchmark sensitive. Those were the glory years. And I think we're going back to the glory years. I think deregulation, I think on monetary policy, I do believe that one of the reasons Trump has become such a fan is, you know, it's good competition for the dollar. And he wants that. He wants, you know, monetary policy to be influenced by it. I don't think he wants the dollar to go away, and I don't think it will. But I think we're going to have, you know, Bitcoin and the dollar as the two sort of reserve currencies out there.
You recently were talking publicly about tax policy and the velocity of money. And that sounds, for some people, they may say, oh, tax policy, that sounds so boring. But it has a tremendous impact because of the velocity of money on their portfolio. So talk a little bit about your ideas of how these two things are related.
Yeah, I've started, you know, I sometimes get to thinking about something, and if I'm not hearing about it in the press, and I'll just start posting on X. And so, yes, this has been my latest. So the velocity of money is the rate at which money turns over. Now, in an environment of fear, which is what we have right now, in an environment of fear, what do people do? Well, you've got, I'm going to say 30% of the labor force, which is in either government or quasi-government, including healthcare, education, and so forth. 30% or more of the labor force is saying, am I going to have a job? How is this going to filter down to the state and local sector? That's where the bulk of the jobs are. So there's fear. And that will slow the velocity of money down. So it hit me when Walmart came out and said, 2025 is going to be a big slowdown. Last year they had 5% same store sales. Now they're saying it's going to be 3 to 4%. So that's a 30% deceleration in the growth rate. So that's a change in a change. So that's, for them to be so sure now, they're seeing something they do not like. So part of it is fear, but there's another reason people will delay purchases or business activity. If they think their tax rates are going down, and again, lesson from the early Reagan years, if they think their tax rates are going down, they're going to wait and hold off on a lot of activity until they understand what that means. And if you listen to Kevin Hassert recently, he's been talking about the quid pro quo between tariffs and taxes. What that means to me, given that Art has been an advisor to every president with the exception of 2 in the last, I'm going to say 30, 40, 50 years, is that we're moving towards a flatter tax system and lower rates for everyone. That's Reagan Revolution. Reagan delayed the impact. The full 25 percentage point reduction took 3 years. The economy fell into 2 recessions. Why? Well, there were a lot of other reasons, but we learned very quickly in 1983, oh my gosh, we went into a boom. They were all waiting for that last time. So you've got fear of unemployment. You've got, wait, how much of a better deal am I going to get out there? And the same thing with pricing. If people think prices are coming down and interest rates are coming down, as President Trump is telling us, and long rates have started coming down. Nobody believed that was going to happen. They're going to hold off for the lower rates and lower prices. So those are 3 delays. Now, what does this mean? Today, we got Atlanta's GDP now estimate is negative for the first quarter, negative GDP. Now, we have been saying, and many people didn't agree with this point of view, but I think it's playing out now. We've been in a rolling recession since the Fed started raising rates in 22. It jacked them up at a record-breaking pace. We've never had anything like that. You go back to Volcker, everybody remembers 20% interest rates. Yeah, went from 10 to 20%. That's a 2-fold increase. We went up 24-fold in little more than a year's time. That was a major shock to the system. And I think we have been one sector after another moving down. The one that did not capitulate was the consumer. And it did not capitulate because of the high-end consumer. Well, guess what? In the last University of Michigan consumer sentiment survey, the high-income earners' confidence cracked. So I think we're going to see a completely different tune in the next few months.
What you're basically arguing for is as tariff revenue goes up, Trump will bring down the tax rate, which he did do in 2018, right? He started to implement tariffs. He dropped us from 39.6 to 37% in the federal income tax. But are you making an argument that he should drop the tax rate earlier or that he should drag it out over time?
Tax cuts retroactive. Now, and so would Art Laffer. It doesn't matter what I think. You know?
Explain retroactive tax cuts. Everyone in here just sat up. They got excited.
So I don't know how he is such a deal maker. It's going to be amazing to see if he pulls this off. But I think if he only has 2 years before he effectively becomes a lame duck. And he knows that, which is another reason I'm posting this, because let's get this thing going as quickly as possible. If we said, we're taking your tax rates down, choose a percentage, 3 percentage points, retroactive, if they did this very soon, to, February 1st, or March 1st, let's say, and they finish the negotiation, that would take the uncertainty away. That would take that very important uncertainty away. And honestly, I think we will have a booming economy with much lower than expected inflation, because the productivity gains, after we've been through this rolling recession, and now here's the last leg of it. We were housing, autos, capital spending, small businesses creamed, lower income creamed, finally high income cracking. We're ready for a massive productivity increase, which, I learned again in the early 80s so much. Productivity increases and a rising dollar are 2 of the biggest antidotes to inflation. And I think we're going to be shocked at how low inflation goes.
The last thing I want to talk about is the strategic Bitcoin reserve. There are people in this room that are salivating over the idea that they got to front run the United States of America and every other country to buy Bitcoin. And they think that when the United States, when not if, finally capitulates and buys Bitcoin, the price of Bitcoin will look like a vertical line straight up. Forget the price impact for a second, but what do you think the odds of a strategic Bitcoin reserve are, let's say, this year?
This year, again, it's a high priority. I think this this issue became a one-issue voter issue, right? And the president is going to make good on his promise, because this really helped bring in the young people. And so I do, and Senator Lummis has done. I heard she was here, but she's done an amazing job. She has an incredible staff. So I do think it will. I do think it will happen. Now, I know there are controversies out there. There are truly some, the confiscation of some Bitcoin. That was truly illicit and criminal and all of that. There are questions about others. And then there's the other question is, wait a minute, Are you really then going to get all the way up to 1 million Bitcoin? How do you do that? How do you fund it? Well, our gold is at cost on our balance sheet. Land is at cost. I learned from Senator Lummis that a third of the land in the United States and 50% in Wyoming is on our country's balance sheets at cost. Think about that. Think about that. We could sell a little bit off, and we could definitely, and same with gold. Same with gold.
Do you think that countries will drop gold to buy Bitcoin, or do you think they both win together?
I'm sorry.
Do you think that countries will sell some of their gold to buy Bitcoin, or do you think that this is an additive thing?
I don't know the answer to that, but as they're scraping around looking for alternatives, it becomes a diversifier, I think, because even relative to gold, Bitcoin is a diversifier. The correlations are a little higher than to other assets, but still not quite there. There was something, the other thing I learned today was that there are 50 bills going through 22 states right now around Bitcoin reserves. So that's very interesting. Texas, Arizona, and Utah, I think, have seen progress within the last week. Which is very exciting because Texas and California, each of those states, is bigger than Canada. And of course, Canada is is huge in terms of a gold resource base.
Ladies and gentlemen, Cathie Wood.
Thank you.
You always do a great job.